Mike Szyszewski from This Week's Football Morning in America regarding Bill Belichick, his quote to Peter King. I've always felt Bill had a curiosity about the game. It wasn't what he already knew. It was what he was still going to learn and how he was going to use what he knew in the ever-changing environment that he's in. He's very adaptive. There's nobody who's built a better culture in pro sports than him. Culture should not be assumed. It needs miracle grow every year, and he's been able to keep that culture going. There's a Patriot way. I totally admire that. Strong words from one of the great all-time basketball coaches, and Belichick turns 70 on Saturday. That's why Peter was delving into what made Belichick who he is, what makes him who he continues to be. 321 wins, and Peter, he just keeps on going.
You know, you remember, Mike, it was about, I think, 14, 15 years ago when Belichick basically said, well, I'm not going to be hanging around coaching into my 70s like Marv Levy was. And I think what has happened over time is that all of the stuff about age has just become a number. You know, from Tom Brady getting ready to play this year at age 45 to coaches, Pete Carroll is 70, Belichick now is 70. I looked at some stills of George Halas in his last year in 1967 when he coached at age 72. Halas looked like he was 80 years old. You look at Pete Carroll, you look at Bill Belichick. I mean, Belichick looks like he's 55. And again, I have no idea what his away from the building life is like. But the fact is that Belichick has no intention, from everything I've heard from people who are close to him. Josh McDaniels, I wouldn't be surprised if he was still there in 10 years. Now, I don't think that. But, Mike, he's 27 wins away from breaking the all-time record. Don Shula's got 347. That includes the playoffs. Belichick has 321. That includes playoffs. 27 wins away. And again, I don't think Bill Belichick, who has a tremendous love of history and tremendous regard for history, I don't think he's hanging around to catch Don Shula. I think he's coaching because he still loves coaching and really wants to rebuild this franchise back to a position of prominence. And I don't know whether it's going to be 3 years or 4, but there's little doubt in my mind that he will own the record for most coaching victories, and he'll do it in fewer games than Don Shula did it in.
Several years ago at the league meetings, Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, told me in an interview that was part of the PFT Live program that he wants to see Bill Belichick coach into his 80s. He wants to see him perform at a high level like a Warren Buffett or a Rupert Murdoch well past his 80th birthday. He believes he can. You mentioned George Halas. That's the big caveat to me, because Halas got to the point, and he explained this when he retired, he could no longer physically do the job. He couldn't run to the official when it was time to yell at a bad call. That he knew that the joints from the waist down were no longer able to carry him the way that they did. And that becomes the question then, do you go Joe Paterno and coach from the press box? At what point do you say, this is my identity, this is who I've been for all these years, but I have to surrender this? That's going to be the challenge for Bill Belichick. And as he gets to 71, 72, 73, at what point does he no longer physically have the ability to do it? And this came up a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about John Harbaugh, who is 59. Chuck Noll retired 30 years ago at 59. Harbaugh, I think, of all the guys currently coaching, is the one most likely to coach into his 80s, because you wouldn't guess that he's 59. He looks 39, 34 maybe. And, it's kind of a sign of where society is going. Cleaner living, more exercise. It all kind of adds up. But, yeah, I don't see Belichick stopping because, Peter, at this point, it's who he is. What else would he do? What would he do with his time if all of a sudden he wasn't doing the thing that has been his life for most of it?
The interesting thing about Belichick is that he apparently has a pretty good and satisfying life outside of football. He lives on Nantucket for a little portion of his off season, has a home there, absolutely loves it, loves sailing. It's funny. Noel was a big sailor also. And, who knows what he would do outside of football. But I agree with you, Mike. And, look, I credit Chris Sims for this one also. One of the reasons why why this game doesn't kill Bill Belichick is go back and play the video of the Super Bowl against Seattle, where you're seeing the clock tick down inside of 1 minute, 50 seconds, 45 seconds, 42 seconds. Bill, call a timeout, call a timeout. And the reason he didn't call a timeout is he wanted the pressure to be on the Seattle Seahawks. And it turns out the pressure was on the Seattle Seahawks. And I don't know whether you'd call it a choke. I don't know what you'd call it. But it worked. That coaching was an example of how Belichick could just sit there and let the time tick off the clock. And if Seattle had scored right there and given the Patriots the ball back with 21 seconds to go or whatever it would have been, and you would have said, Belichick, what a dummy. What an absolute idiot. I can't believe what a jerk he was. But Belichick is secure enough in his own skin to say, I'm going to let that happen. And the reason I bring up Sims is that he was on his coaching staff for a year plus, and he saw it every day. And one of the things that Chris says now is and I'm paraphrasing him, May 12th is as important to Bill Belichick as October 12th is. Every day in building your organization, in building your team, is just as important as a game day. And that is the way that Bill Belichick has always run his business, and it's worked out pretty well.
It requires a highly functioning mind and a sufficiently functioning body. That is going to be the key as he turns 70 on Saturday. Happy birthday to one of the all-time great coaches in any sport, and we'll see how long it takes for him to get back to the top of the mountain. I would not bet against another Super Bowl championship, or maybe more than one, for Bill Belichick by the time he calls it quits for good.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.